He's everywhere, from the Oval Office to freeing hostages in Gaza to meeting with the Russians about Ukraine.
It was positive, upbeat, constructive.
Steve Witkoff's official title is Middle East Envoy, but President Trump simply calls him my dear friend and a deal maker.
Steve Witkoff, everybody. Done a great job in the Middle East. Really great.
Wickoff was one of the first people President Trump spoke to after his attempted assassination. And on the day of the second attempted assassination, they were playing golf together. That deep friendship, now a working relationship.
I am constantly reminded of the privilege it is to serve under the leadership of my boss, President Donald J. Trump.
After the election, Wickoff spent months flying around the Middle East on his own dime, according to Senator Lindsey Graham. By January, mobbed by well-wishers in Israel's Hostage Square, NBC News got past his bodyguards to find him fighting to stay focused on freeing more hostages.
One is coming out tomorrow.
One is coming out tomorrow. Losing his son, Andrew, to opioids enables him, he says, to relate to families who lose children. A millionaire New York property developer, he's not a trained diplomat, but apparently does have a knack for diplomacy. Shaking former President Biden's hand at Donald Trump's inauguration, he had worked closely with Biden's team, while always diligently giving President Trump the lion's share of the credit, like here with hostage families.
The president stands with you.
The two men are in lockstep. At the inauguration, Wickoff echoing the president's foreign policy.
We are done carrying the financial burden for nations that are unwilling to fund their own progress. The days of blank checks are over.
But there's also growing criticism. It was after Wickoff's visit to Gaza that President Trump called for the Palestinian enclave to be, quote, cleaned out. Wickoff supports that policy. Many call it ethnic cleansing, while others have accused Wickoff of being too close to Qatar. He did a New York property deal with the Qataris. And when Wickoff flew to Moscow to free American hostage Mark Fogel, he says he also held a private meeting with President Putin, with only translators present.
The meeting ended, I looked at my watch, and it was close to 3.5 hours that we were in there. We just had a great discussion, me and President Putin.
And NBC's chief international correspondent, Keir Simmons, joins me now. What a fantastic report, Keir. I do want to start right there, with your deep look into Steve Witkoff. He will be attending those talks with Ukraine and Saudi Arabia next week. Is it your sense that his portfolio is actually expanding beyond just the special envoy to the Middle East?
Oh, no doubt about it. Listen, I think his key attribute is his closeness to President Putin himself. You know, he's this kind of soft-spoken, genteel kind of seeming guy. When you speak to him, he seems so friendly, but he's also the man who says the same kind of things that President Trump says, the often kind of mind-bending, and did he really say that kind of stuff? Just in the past few days, saying that the US and Israel may act together to target Hamas. When it comes to those talks with the Ukrainians and with the Russians here, I'll tell you honestly, Kristen, when you talk to Russian officials here in Moscow, they are quite disparaging about him. They talk about him as not knowing very much about the situation. Now, the Russians would say that, of course. They are tough negotiators, and that's what the Trump administration is going to find in the weeks and months ahead. So it doesn't necessarily reflect Steve Witkoff's ability. But I think what he is able to achieve, I think the jury is still out on a number of levels.
I think you're right about that. And you take me to my next question. There are going to be these diplomatic talks in Saudi Arabia, U.S. officials with Ukrainian officials. It comes as the president's threatening potentially more sanctions against Russia. How is Moscow responding to this, Keir? And we have less than a minute.
Yeah, you know, I think that the Kremlin is probably as confused as many, because just today, President Trump, on the one hand, as you say, saying that he finds it easier to negotiate with the Russians. On the other hand, saying they're pounding Ukraine and that they need to stop, or he will put in wider sanctions. The reality is, this is the real reality here in Russia, Kristen, is that when you talk to ordinary Russians and Russian officials, they say they do want peace, but they want it on their terms. President Trump is going to find this a tough negotiation.
All right, Keir Simmons, fantastic reporting as always. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.